There's this article that came out that's saying like maybe your spouse shouldn't be your best friend, but you know the problem I have with that article is that it's listening to the opinions of men. Like, they always get it wrong. Okay, let me just show you. Like, I'm not listening to this person. I don't know much about him. I did a little research, but the article that I'm talking about interviews this man. So then I went and looked at some of his other articles. Let me tell you something. They can come so close to the point and the problem and the thing that would really help us get out of this hellscape. And yet they just don't bring in history. They just don't bring in patriarchy. And they're like, God, it drives me nuts. And yet they get to keep writing this stuff, whole books. Ugh. Now, I am not here to say that man has no good points. I don't know enough about him to do a deep dive. But all I know is that this article, should your partner really be your best friend, is being talked about. And it has some good points, things that I've actually written about. Like in this viral article I wrote for Harper's Bazaar. Men have no friends and women bear the burden. I agree with a lot of the points of that article, and I'm going to go through some of them. But God, I swear to God, I don't want to hear anything else about marriage and what to do about it and what the real problem is from men, okay? Unless you are a man talking to other men and are actually in a healthy relationship with a woman who's also a feminist and is actually involved in your work, I don't care what you have to say. Because they're just going to come so close and miss. Now, before we dive in here, I'm Melanie Hamlet. I'm a journalist, a storyteller, and a lot of other things. And Patreon is where I do most of my work now. That's what's paying all my bills because of algorithms doing their thing. So if you want to support my work, please go join my Patreon. I do lives over there, travel content. I'm going to watch parties soon. And I share more of my personal life there because I don't want to share it for the whole internet anymore. And I am married now, but most of my life, I was not only not married, I was single, okay? I didn't even start dating until like 36. So I am not like, yay, marriage. In fact, I think marriage is usually bad for women. It wasn't until some of my friends who had really healthy partners where I was like, oh, so you don't always get screwed? Like every single time get screwed? Huh. So I became more open to it. But in general, I think most marriages are exploitive and take years off of women's life. The statistics prove that, especially if there's kids involved. And I really want us to question the institution of marriage, and I want us to focus more on our friendships and community. And, marriage is like not be the center of women's world, especially, just the world. Because capitalism and all that stuff needs especially heterosexual marriage. Although it's not always heterosexual people in these marriages. We know that, right? But the system needs marriage. And I swear, we're going to see more and more of this stuff like marriage. How do we think that? Marriage, really? Blah, 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 blah. They are not talking to women. Like they're talking to women, but they're not talking from the point of view of women. And they're not like being helpful to women. So I don't trust any advice that a man has given, with some rare exceptions. And I encourage you to pay attention to who's being interviewed and who the author of these things are. So this piece was in the New York Times. And while it was written by a woman, it's a pretty interesting piece. I really wish that a man had not been included in so much of this piece. Like, especially a man trying to sell his book right now. Maybe it's a good book. It could be brilliant. But in what I've read so far in this interview and another article that he wrote in another interview, doesn't address patriarchy and men's entitlement, and anything that is not addressing those things, especially male entitlement. I don't care what you have to say. I really don't. She starts off by talking about Stephanie Lopez, who's like, yeah, my husband's good qualities, character, kindness, integrity, blah, blah, blah. Is he her best friend? Nope. Not only nope, no exclamation point. I don't have schmags with my friends. Don't pay bills with my friends. And if I did, that would change the whole dynamic. So then the article goes into like this whole thing is like, should they be your best friend? So then it goes on to interview Alexandra Solomon, who has this podcast, Reimagining Love. And she says, we want somebody who sees us and gets us. Well, that's the same darn thing we get in our friendships. We really are craving that same sense of affinity and admiration. I agree. But is it unreasonable to expect your bedmate to be your best friend or the highest the form of intimacy? So then they go into another example from Jennifer Santiago, who's basically been with her husband since they were in high school, like on and off. They just kept coming back to each other because they're just so close, and that there's some empty void whenever they take a break. Wow, we truly do everything together. See, I'm not interested in that, y'all. I mean, everyone has different goals for marriages, but I don't want that. Then comes this interview with Eli, and this is where they lose me. Historically, that is a relatively new approach to romantic relationship, as Eli, a social psychologist and the author of The All or Nothing Marriage, How the Best Marriages Work, says, until the mid-1800s, marriage in the United States mostly revolved around ensuring partners had their basic needs like food and shelter met. So, security basically met. Or the pragmatic era, as he likes to call it. And then between 1850 and 1965, marriage entered the love-based era, in which the primary relationship functions were about love, companionship. Now, I'm going to stop you right there, Eli. What are you talking about? You sound like a podcast bro. You sound like a podcast bro. All these men who are like, yeah, what? Our grandparents, blah, 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 blah. You know what? Your grandma, where's my stick? Your grandma was probably a hostage. A hostage. At least one of my grandmas was a hostage. Literally, a hostage. Why? Because she couldn't have a bank account. Because she couldn't get a divorce because my grandpa wouldn't let her. Because of the laws. Because of, she couldn't own a home. She couldn't do crap without this man releasing her from the marriage. So she just cheated on him with a neighbor for 20 years. Go, Granny! That's another story. Like I've said before, this man, my grandpa, she died 10, 15, I don't know how, a while before him from the stress of this man. And then what did he do? He immediately went out, started dating all these women. And he celebrated at her funeral, free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. I'm king of the mountain now. Literally did all that at her funeral. So I'm sorry, Eli. What love-based era are you talking about, bro? Because no-fault divorce hasn't been around that long. And thanks to Project 2025, it probably is going away soon. Who knows? Hope not. You could also grape your wife until Lorena Bobbitt came in, whacked that thing off and threw it out the car window. Woo! Way to go, Lorena. And then we started dealing with, marital grape. Oh, and by the way, a lot of women were married to men who preyed on them when they were teenagers. A lot of women were married to men who got knocked up by these predatory men, and then were pressured into marrying them to not make the family look good. There's all these reasons why women were getting married during this pragmatic era, and I promise you, most of it was not about love. What are you talking about? In theory, sure. But dude, are you a podcast bro? Because you sound like one. 1965, women couldn't even have credit cards yet. Abortion wasn't do y'all understand what I'm talking about? Has this man read a history book? How could he be a professor and writing books and doing all this without mentioning the historical context? And then he's like, since 1965, we've been in a self-expressive era in which marriage is about not only love, but also personal growth. Whose personal growth, Eli? Certainly not women's. Do you know many women who have grown in a marriage? Because most of the women that I know, with the exception of a few, myself included, they got sicker in a marriage, they became more depressed in a marriage, and they literally lost themselves in a marriage because they may be personally growing in all these ways, but they're not it's only because they're going to therapy all the time, reading books, listening to podcasts, hanging out with their friends, and working on themselves, while a man typically as exploiting the crap out of her and spending all his free time hunting or playing games or running marathons or whatever the hell he's doing, where he just, avoids his family that he literally created but wants nothing to do with. So what are you talking about? I know that these are the ideas that we've been sold, but that is not the reality. Unless a man is making your life better, he is making it harder. Unless you're glowing up in a marriage, you are becoming haggard and losing years off of your life. So What are you talking about, Eli? I don't like you. Maybe you're a nice person, but you need to read more books. Now, then he gets to this point, which I agree on. I've written about this myself. The marital relationship has taken more and more responsibility for our social and psychological needs. But I'd even argue that you're talking about men. Women have always had to center men in relationships, either by law or because of our condition. It's men who look to women for everything. Now, I don't mean to brag now. Yes, I do. But in my article, I talk about this very thing. But I talk about how it's men. Men who are taught that. I'm not taught that. Yes, women are taught to center men, to self-abandon for men, to sacrifice for men, and we're basically so worn out from the extra labor that they put on us that's the only reason why women don't have more friends and more hobbies and more art and more things, because especially if you have children, okay? But this whole like one and only, that's what men believe. I'm not saying that women don't believe this, but this is not the reality of women, because women can't survive without other women, because most of the women who have husbands who have not, which most of them are not dealing with their patriarchal entitlement, those men are putting so much work on those women. The women have other women that they outsource things, even if it's just literally to complain about them, right? It is women showing up and doing Mother's Day stuff and birthday stuff and all this stuff because their husbands aren't doing it for them. So again, what are you talking about, Eli? Now again, I'm not saying that men suck. I am saying that men who've been conditioned by patriarchy, who are not willing to unlearn patriarchy, they suck at relationships and they make our lives worse. And this is what they do. Even though both of us are taught that this is the one and only, and this is the most important relationship of our life, women end up living that reality because men burden us with so much labor, free labor, that they expect us to do. They get more free time, not less, when they hook up with us. They get more money, not less, when they hook up with us. They get promotions and this whole one and only, but men will cast us as their wives, girlfriends, play our best friend, which a lot of men aren't even doing that. Lover, career advisor, stylist, social secretary, emotional cheerleader, mom, and eventually our on-call therapists. Minus paying us $200 an hour. And this form of emotional gold digging is not only detrimental to men, because y'all become helpless children who can't and won't take care of yourselves, and you end up hating yourselves for being so dependent on us, and you end up hating us for being so dependent on us, and punish us for the rest of your lives for what you make us do, because it feels weird being like, I'm the king of the world, but I'm completely worthless. But at least I got some bitch doing it for me. It's exhausting. An entire generation of women, generations of women. And so I'm sorry, bro, but it is not women who ever get into a marriage in general who they may go into it thinking he's the one and only one. But the only reason they stay in that mentality is because he forces her into it through labor. And yet still, she always finds time to work on her stuff, usually. Unless she has so many children, she completely loses herself to that too. Emotional gold digging, though, as I cited here, Aaron Rodgers is the one who that tweet went viral a long time ago. Across the spectrum, women were complaining about the same thing. While they read countless self-help books, listen to podcasts, seek out career advisors, turn to female friends or family members for advice and support, or spend a small fortune on therapists to deal with old wounds and current problems, the men in their lives simply rely on us. That's right. That's right. The one and only is literally only how men operate and see us. We have this fantasy, but that's not the reality of most married women. It is by forcing to center him and our own patriarchal conditioning, plus maybe our parents and our mother-in-laws and all those other people. And in this article that I spent 6 months researching, which the second half is literally giving men resources to go help themselves, and they still would find my email and be like, what do I do now, Melanie? Stranger on the internet who lives in another country, who gave all of these resources. What do I do? Anything, literally. Anyway, This one person I interviewed, she called herself the beck and call girl, and she called herself out for enabling men and for her ego being a little attached to being that role of the everything, right? That is the work we have to do, among other things. Our work is to become more selfish and less attached to being helpers and fixers and blah, 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 because we're always going to do that anyway. I'm making gross generalizations here. And men's have been conditioned to be so freaking selfish that they don't think about anybody. So their work is to become less self-centered, and ours is to become more self-centered, although both can be very harmful, extreme. Not only was this woman, does she care for her husband and children, she just moved in with her mom to take care of her as well because she knows her brothers won't. But recently they both got divorced. Shocker, because those women are tired of them. And they're already turning to her, not each other, to provide support for that their wives used to. So the amount of emotional labor that women will do for men, even if you do not marry or date men, I promise you, there is a man in your life who's going to try to exploit you. It's, like literal strangers do this. I see all the time a man with his own children ignoring and then the woman will be like, oh, and come and help him. A stranger. Speaking of emotional labor, if you've not read this book by my mutual Rose Hackman, it is one of the best books I've ever read. I'm going to talk about this more in future videos. I also had her on a live that was amazing, which you can see on my Patreon if you join that tier. Men drain the emotional life out of women. She says, I love them, but good Lord, they've become the bane of my existence. She admits that she enables her brothers by saying yes all the time, partly out of guilt, but also partly because she loves being needed. And I love that she called herself out on that. And to feel important. Exactly. This need, that feeling needed and feeling important is literally what kept me in an abusive relationship with a man. So I'm telling you, we got to get rid of these two things. We got to work on a lot, but the being needed and important, that attachment to our whole identity being those two things is what's killing us. Because it's a catch-22. It eventually becomes too much and I end up exhausted and resentful. Sound familiar? Like Johnson, most of the women I spoke to for this piece believe that their ego and self-worth are often wrapped up in being a man's crutch. But the older women get, the less willing they seem to be a man's everything. Not only because we become more confident, wise, wealth, and tired with age, but because our responsibilities pile up with each passing year. So we're getting busier and busier with time, right? More responsibilities, even when retired. Like I said, all the women I know who are retired are taking care of their spouses, ailing friends, grandchildren, parents, etc., etc. Well, not all of them. I've got some role models who I'm like, yeah. But anyway, women are always going to take care of people. That's what we've been conditioned to do. Not all, okay? But while women are just doing this constantly till the day we die, men, on the other hand, don't do anything to create the friendships and the social fabric. And then once they're retired, they're really screwed because they don't even see anyone anymore other than their wife. As she said, the guys at work are the only people other than me that my husband ever talked to. So when these men retire, they expect their wives to be the source of entertainment and even get jealous that they have a life while the husbands don't. And this is one of the best quotes I have ever gotten while doing an interview. Johnson jokes that women her mom's age seem to be waiting for their husbands to die so they can finally start their life. I'll get a call saying so-and-so kicked the bucket, and sure enough, his widow is on a cruise around the world a week later with her girlfriend. So, Eli, it seems to me that women's personal development actually starts in terms of really being able to spend a lot of time with the people who really cherish them and do things they're interested in and travel more, starts when their husbands die. If they outlive their husbands, which neither of my grandmas did. So don't wait the clock out, y'all. Another woman I interviewed said that when she literally offered to pay for her boyfriend to go to therapy, he was like, why would I do that? I have you. And men's refusal to go to therapy makes them angrier, more irritable, more aggressive, more dangerous, which is why the DV rates go during when men retire. And at the time of writing this, the statistics were still pretty bleak. Only 5% of men seek outpatient mental health services. I would like to think that things have changed. This is 6 years ago. And then as I talk about there a little bit here, there's also lack of access due to the cost, due to social stigma that are even higher. Usually a lot of times the more marginalized you are, along with the systemic discrimination, racial stereotypes, and everything else. So when I get back to this article, who are you talking to, Eli? You should just say, hey, men, right? Because even though women have been taught to think this way, it is men who make women their everything, not women. Even the biggest pick-me still has to rely on someone else because the men aren't going to do it. So when asked if romantic relationships are supposed to fill so many roles, he said, well, whether your relationship can deliver or not. For example, he feels delighted for people who say they want their romantic partners to also be their best friends, but he suggests they consider something. Are there other expectations they can let go of? Wait till you see that. For instance, he says, it is a lot to expect your partner to be the co-chief executive of the household, to split childcare, to be your exclusive companion, and to be your best friend. See, you know what I'm seeing there is that men can't do all of this, so pick a couple. You have them be your best friend and maybe your partner, but men don't have to do the other stuff because you're asking for too much. Because I'm sorry, when you say, don't expect he's saying, hey ladies, don't expect men to be the co-chief executive of the household because that's you. That's a you thing. Don't to split childcare because that's a you thing. Or, all this other stuff. But, pick a couple. I don't want to sound like a scold. I just want people to be aware that every additional expectation that you're throwing on top of your relationship comes with opportunity for enhanced closeness. And it comes with additional risk that the relationship will buckle under the weight of those expectations. So ladies, you can ask men to do all this stuff because, you know what pisses me off is that if I married my best friend Liz, who is my soulmate, she has been my best friend for 20 years. My husband is also one of my best friends, but Liz, and my husband knows it. I'm like, she's my bitch, okay? She will always be as important to me as you ever will be, He knows that. In fact, my relationships with my friends in general will always be critical to my life. They always have been. They always will be. I do not need marriage, nor does he. That's why I married him, among other reasons. But if I married my best friend Liz, she would never ask me to not take on the responsibility of children and co-executive directing that house. She would never expect me to do it. She actually gave me a really good litmus test, and I've shared it before. I'll share it again. Whenever I'm because I'm deconstructing patriarchy within this head. It's so deep in here, like all these systems of oppression that I'm constantly having to deconstruct and unlearn. And every time I'm like, wait, do I not want to do something nice for my partner? Because I'm being a bitch or because I am centering myself. Because a lot of times I don't know if this is and I didn't even grow up with a dad in my house. I haven't grown up with a single mom who centered herself and her children. But I still got this messaging all over the place. So I have to go, okay, would I do this for Liz? And if the answer is yes, then I do it. If the answer is no, I don't do it. Obviously it's not it's not that rigid, but it really helped me get really clear. If this is my best friend, also one of my best friends, if I wouldn't do this for my female best friend, I ain't doing it for a male best friend. In terms of things around the house, extra emotional labor, extra la 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 la. So this guy, Eli, I did not even realize how much I hated this article until I actually read this out loud. So what he's saying is that you can ask your partner to be, do all that stuff because they assume that you're going to fork them. Or he'll probably go have an affair. He didn't say that, but he assumes that, that you're going to be the best friend, even though a lot of these men aren't even that. They literally hate their wives. They don't want to even hang out with them. They hang out with their guys or watch TV all the freaking time. But if you're going to ask them to do all that stuff, you risk that the relationship will buckle under the expectations of who? Her expectation. I'm not saying it's always this, but in a cishet, heteronormative marriage, it is this. He's talking about men. He suggested releasing some of that pressure. Can you lean on other friends for emotional support? First, we've already been doing that. Women have always done this. It's men. You need to call men out for this. God, this is making me so much. I'm sorry. I'm not that unhinged, but I didn't realize how much I hate this article till like now. Are you okay being emotionally close to your partner, but not necessarily having this spiciest intimate life together? Again, I think that's for men. And you know what? Well, that's another video. Because I know a lot of women who have amazing partners and they love their marriage. But it's the men who don't want to have schmecks all the time. You know, I find a lot of times the men who are just like jerk off all the time and are like, you know, addicted to porn and stuff like that. Those are the men who are not exploring their emotional lives, who don't have any other form of intimacy, and that's all they know. Because, I don't know, once women hit like 35, 40 and all that stuff, well, if you're not at that age, watch out. Watch out. The little sexual demon's gonna go. Unless you actually don't like your husband, in which case you'll be completely cut off from it. I'm not saying this is across the board. I'm just saying this idea that like women are like faking headaches. That's usually women faking headaches is because they don't want to fork their husbands. And it's not because they don't have a schmegs drive. It's because he is acting like a little boy. And women don't want to fork little boys. But I tell you, women in their 30s, 40s, and I don't know about 50s. I'm not there yet. They're horny bitches. Y'all want a video about that? Because I got stuff to say. There's science behind all this stuff too. We've just all been brainwashed into thinking that it's this or that, and it's something else. Dr. Solomon believes that friendship, particularly best friendship, is not a requisite for long-term intimacy. But it doesn't hurt, she said. Okay, again, why the hell would I want someone in my house that I'm not good friends with? And is this just because y'all think of there's only one best friend? Because that's not how I think. I don't think you can only have one best friend. I'm so confused by this. What are y'all talking about? I do not want someone in my house that I trust my money with, that I trust my life with, because this most likely the person who's gonna me is the man I share a bed with, right? I don't want to trust my literal, like, my nervous system and my everything. Put that in the hands of someone that I don't consider one of my very best friends. Who are y'all marrying? You're like some person that you're just like, yeah, whatever. They're kind of cool. I'm so confused by this. Liking your partner, which she describes as admiring them, finding them funny, caring about their worldview. Oh, he just did the flip. And having fun with simply being together can cushion the other relationship challenges a couple might face. Why would I want to go through any relationship challenges if I didn't really like? What are y'all talking about? Are y'all confused? I am so confused. What are they talking about? Are they trying to normalize people marrying people they hate or like don't really like at all and wouldn't want? If you wouldn't want to be in a confinement with your partner, maybe you shouldn't marry them, right? Why y'all think so many people got divorced after confinement? Because when they're stuck in a house together, they're like, you know what? I actually kind of hate you. You exploit me all the time. Dr. Solomon admitted that while she adores her husband of 26 years, he is not her best friend. My best friend name is Allie, and she lives in Seattle. And she's been in that spot since we were 10 years old. Okay, I get it. But why can you only have one best friend? I don't understand, y'all. What is the point of marrying someone that you admire and adore, but you don't trust with your life? Because this is literally a man of all people. The one factor that literally ruins women's lives on a regular basis. What is the point? Now that we don't have to marry them because we can have money and credit cards, what are y'all doing? Ultimately, maintaining a tight romantic bond may come down to managing expectations and discussing them, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here's Eli again. He had a mentor who described marriage and relationships as best friends plus schmeg. While he thinks that one is a very viable approach to relationships, he said it is by no means the only one. you too can marry a woman you hate and get all that free labor from her and a schmegs partner, a free schmegs worker too, and it works out great. Couples need some kind of glue, commitment, shared values, and finances. Something, he said, but it doesn't need to be friendship. Oh my God, Eli, are you married? I should look into. Do you hate your wife? Do you date women? Are you married? What are you talking? Don't get married if you're only sharing commitment, schmegs, finances. Maybe, but like him admitting that marriage benefits men rarely benefits women. And again, if she's not glowing up in that relationship and growing into this, and personal development isn't going, psh, she's slowly dying. And he never mentions this once. I am so sorry I'm getting so worked up, y'all. I had no idea this would piss me off so much, but here we go. I'm going to show you one other article. I'm going to show you clips of a couple different, I'm not going to go into it too much, to show you why we need to not listen to this man and men in general when they're talking about marriage, with some rare exceptions. And if you want a cheat sheet on how to know if you should listen to him, first of all, most men are getting their stuff from women. All the stuff they're saying, they're stealing our work, our ideas, even our literal language, and just regurgitating it. Look, a man said it. Look, listen to me. And women will just buy it, eat it up. Follow me and my mutuals and stop following these men unless they're regularly giving credit to women and humble enough to talk about themselves as instead of not all men. And most importantly, they're talking to men. They're talking to men and they're not shaming men. But even some of those men are still whatever. But let me tell you something. If he's not saying patriarchy and entitlement in his talks about marriage, don't listen. So Eli wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, which I'm guessing is maybe what got him his book deal. Or maybe he was trying to sell his book. I don't know. All I know is it's more of this gibberish. It's this. The all or nothing marriage. So again, he breaks down, there's the institutional marriage, which is between the nation's founding, or whatever you want to call that, until 1850. But the way he describes this shows me he doesn't get it. Around then, Americans, their requirements revolved around things like food, protection, shelter, and protection from violence. Funny, because the women who were being protected from violence were usually experiencing just as much, if not more, violence from these protectors from violence. So shut up, Eli. And even if they weren't going boom, 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 they were working these women to death. To be sure, Americans were pleased if they experienced an emotional connection with their spouse, but such affinities were prerequisite of a well-functioning marriage rather than its central purpose. Who are you talking about? Again, red pill. This is red pill crap right here. This idea that all these women were just so happy back. These marriages were just so solid. And then it wasn't women literally being held hostage. If you don't follow Candace Kelly, one of my mutuals, she's writing a book about this right now, about how most of our grandmas were hostages. In the area of companionate marriage between 1850 and 1965, they're more, focused more on intimate needs such as to be loved, and the experience of fulfilling sex life. Well, see, here's the other thing you're leaving out. Is that men have always been experiencing a fulfilling schmegs life, and by that they're just griping, or they have conjugal duties expected of. We think women who can't divorce and who financially depend on a man because they cannot have a bank account. Do you think they have a fulfilling schmegs life? Because again, they didn't have bank accounts back then. But do you think they even felt that they could have one? Because I'm telling you, women who have money, I wasn't until my 40s with way more rights than these women. Was I like, hey, you got to eat my before you can stick it in me? Okay, even with money and independence from men, I still didn't know how to center my pleasure. It took me so many hookups on Tinder to learn how to do that. I've written about that in many articles if you want to Google it. So who are you talking about? I'd be willing to bet most women were in this era between 1850 and 1965. Most women were not expecting or having fulfilling schmegs life. Shut up, Eli. Oh my God. And then he's all like, blah, 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 urban, rural, blah. And distinct schmegual fears, blah. And as the nation became wealthier and its social institutions became stronger, Americans had the luxury of looking to marriage primarily for love and companion. Who you talking about, bro? This is between 1850 and 1965. Women couldn't have bank accounts or mortgages and had to have permission. But like, women were so tied. Women were tied to men. What are you talking about? Women had financial freedom. You really think they would have been getting married? That's why they've been obsessed with love as being the big pusher, because once, women could actually do stuff without being held hostage, now they got to sell us on, oh, love, la 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 la. Since 1965, we've been living in an era of self-expressive marriage. Americans now look to marriage increasingly for self-discovery, self-esteem, and personal growth. Now, even though women may be looking to that, absolutely, we've been trained to look at it for that. We're not getting that from marriage. Most of us. I am. That's because I married so late. I got married at 42 and loved my single life so much that it took a man making my life better for me to be willing to give that up. I was taught that men are supposed to give me these things, but they never gave those things. That's why I kept trying, and then I was like, fork this, y'all make my life worse. I'm not doing it. And I didn't F with men for so long. And then one almost took my life when I finally did start dating at 36. So then I tapped out again. So let me tell you something. This may be the cultural conditioning of what they've been forcing down our throats for a long time, of like, you're going to get self-discovery, self-esteem, personal growth for marriage. That's not happening in these marriages, because if someone is exploiting the other person, especially a lot, and especially knowing they're doing it, all of it. Sometimes men don't realize they're doing it as much as they know. They know about most of it. You are not being loved if you're being exploited. And you're certainly not self-discovering, being full of self-esteem and personal growth. And the person who is exploiting you is also, their ego may be grown, but their self-esteem isn't. Their self-discovery is actually being suppressed because they're being a prick. And their personal growth they're going backwards. They're becoming big old king babies who can't and won't do anything for themselves because they're entitled. So who the hell are you talking about, Eli? Sorry, this is a very spicy breakdown. I really was not expecting this today. So, another rotisserie chicken. Then he even has the audacity to be like, now people are like this. You make me want to be a better man. Did you watch the same movie I did? I should break this one down. Because Jack Nicholson was a complete douche. He didn't become a better man. He became a little less selfish. What a horrible, horrible man. And then this way younger, beautiful woman makes him want to be a good man. Well, it doesn't work. Like, of all movies, bro, why this one? That's the worst love story. I gotta watch it again. I didn't like it when it came out. I am sure I would hate it now. Love has become, in good part, the mutual exploration of infinitely rich, complex, exciting selves. That's what it's supposed to be, but men prevent this from happening a lot of the time. He goes into this whole hierarchy of needs, blah. You know what? I'm not interested in men who are talking about hierarchies in general. Shut up. But read this if you want, unless they're criticizing them. But he does mention that somebody who is, not food secure, he mentions like unemployment and poverty and how like divorce rates are higher when like people are stressed. But he fails to mention that until not that long ago, that has how women always are, because men wouldn't give us rights. I'm sorry, not give. That sounds like they're being so benevolent. They withheld our rights. My colleagues and I contend that does mention that those individuals who can invest enough time and energy in their partnerships are seeing better benefits. Okay, but guess who is not doing that? Men. Men are the one. Now, y'all know I'm the hobbies person. I'm the one who tell you that men are financially abusing women through hobbies and through, putting more labor on women with their expensive, time-consuming, out-of-the-home hobbies. So if the relationship is not working because they're not spending enough time together, whose fault is that, do you think, in general? When one person is extremely entitled and the other person has been conditioned to serve. He does mention that Americans are spending less time on their marriages because they're working so much, and brings in all this stuff, and says, maybe government help might, what can be done? Well, the government could actually, reduce inequality with family-friendly work policies and on-site childcare and all that stuff. Then he's kind of like, but, that's just like a little part of it. You know what? They could do all that. And I've talked about this before. Ask in France, they do that. In a lot of countries in Europe, they're doing that over here, right? But guess what? That doesn't solve the entitlement problem. That solves a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve the entitlement problem, which is why the birth rates are still plummeting in countries that provide that, is because the male entitlement. Even if the government steps in and helps people out so they're not so insecure, it's really hard to have kids with someone who either A, hates you or puts all this work on you. No thanks. So he's like, yeah, the government could help. Instead of blaming it on patriarchy and male entitlement at all, he's like, couples need to invest more in their marriage. Bro, not once do you mention how much men don't want to hang out with their own wives. And if women don't want to hang out with the men, it's because we don't want to watch their TV show or go to their dumb sporting events. They only want to do things they're interested in. So I'm just going to show you, there was one other article. I'm not going through this whole thing, but y'all remember I did a video like last week, I think, from this same author, Olga. I'm pretty sure it was her. It was in the Atlantic. She talked about how her husband was making her a trad wife and how like fair play doesn't really work. Usually because men don't want to do it. That's really what it's about. Fair play works, but the problem is like a lot of men just won't do it. So again, the problem is men, not the book or the system. So anyway, when she asked him like how much his marriage changed in the 100 years, he's like, yeah, we put too many expectations on our spouse to make us, a better version of ourselves, more authentic, blah. So she says, so you mean like, for a random example, like somebody who provides interesting feedback on our articles that we're writing? He's like, nah, like listen to this. It's like, it's not totally uncommon to hear someone say, he's a wonderful man and a loving father, and I like and respect him, but I feel like really stagnant in the relationship. I feel like I'm not growing, and I'm not willing to stay in a marriage where I feel stagnant for the next 20 years. If she's not growing, though, a lot of times that's because he's holding her back. Usually, especially with children, because all he does is add extra labor and make her center him. But instead, Eli here is like, see, y'all are expecting too much. You're expecting to grow and change and become better versions of yourself because you're married. What are you talking about? And so she goes, why weren't our grandparents concerned with that? And then he goes into this whole crap again. Although he does say that there are well-defined expectations that women were nurturers and men weren't. And then people in the 60s were like, the hell with that. So she asked him, is it risky to have your closest partner also be your harshest critic so that you can grow? He's like, well, and like I said in that New York Times article, it's challenging to have a partner who's simultaneously responsible for making us feel loved and sexy and competent, but also ambitious and hungry and aspirational. Like, how do you make somebody, and I'm going to say it's probably men, how do you make men feel energetic and hungry and eager to work hard without making them feel like you disapprove of the person they currently are? Well, you should be careful what you're asking them to do. And then again, he goes back to this whole thing of like, maybe you need to get some of these met outside the relationship. I promise you women are doing that. We've always done that when we're with men. Even with a healthy partner, I don't seek all my validation and community and all my needs from him. But the problem is men are not doing that in general. So if you've learned nothing else here, this is a prime example of an article literally just published yesterday, I believe, where a man who is all this education and research and an expert and written books and op-eds for New York Times and being interviewed by the Atlantic is saying what podcast bros are saying. Please be careful what you're consuming, and please support with watch hours, Patreon follows, whatever it is. Please support all women who have been doing this work for a long time, who don't get paid nearly as much as those men. Please support our work, because these men are radicalizing these young, that is literally red pill talking points, and I'm so over it. And don't listen to Scott Galloway or Jordan Peterson or any of these men who are experts on men and relationships and marriage, unless they are talking about male entitlement. But in general, just don't watch most of them. Anyway, let me know what you think. Please follow my Patreon. That's the only way I can afford to do this work. And it's fun over there. And let me know if you heard the comment song. Back ride comment song, back ride comment song. This is a comment song about my bike ride today. Back ride comment song, back ride comment song. The stuff I saw on my back ride today. If you're new here, I do a comment song every day, and it's random and I sing random stuff. Today it's a back ride comment song, stuff I saw on my back ride. I didn't want to go on a back ride because I resist doing the things I love and I need to do. But I made myself get on the back ride, and then I saw my favorite piece of artwork. Back ride comment song, look at this. I just love this so much. Back ride song, back ride comment song. It's ending soon, comment song, ending soon, comment song. Did you hear the back ride comment song? Hey! Et voilà!